I'm Courtney, 28, a middle school art teacher with a passion for watercolors and ceramics. Growing up in a wealthy family, I always felt second best to my sister Melody. Despite the favoritism, I believed my parents loved me in their own way. When I got engaged to James, my boyfriend of 3 years who works as a history teacher, my parents surprisingly offered to pay for our wedding. It seemed like a genuine gesture of love. 2 weeks after our honeymoon, I received an email with an itemized invoice for the entire wedding. I later discovered they had given my sister a $350,000 house as her wedding gift. Before I share my story, where are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments. And if my story resonates with you, please like and subscribe to support this channel. I grew up in Fairfield, Connecticut, in a sprawling colonial home with manicured gardens and a pool that hosted summer parties for my father's banking colleagues. My father, Richard, built his career as an investment banker at a prestigious firm in New York City, while my mother, Diana, worked as a high-end real estate agent, catering to wealthy families moving to our exclusive neighborhood. From the outside, we appeared to be the perfect American family, with 2 daughters and a golden retriever named Windsor. My sister Melody, 4 years older than me, set a standard I could never seem to reach. She was valedictorian of her class, captain of the tennis team, and president of the student council. Her room was decorated with trophies and medals that gleamed under the recessed lighting our father had specially installed to showcase her achievements. My parents beamed with pride at every award ceremony, every tournament, every college acceptance letter. I still remember my 10th birthday when I received a set of professional watercolors after begging for art supplies for months. That same day, Melody won a regional debate championship, and my birthday dinner turned into a celebration of her victory. My mother ordered a special cake with "Congratulations, Melody," written in elegant script, while my own birthday cake sat in the refrigerator forgotten until the next day, when half of it was thrown away because no one was interested anymore. Art is a lovely hobby, Courtney, my mother would say whenever I showed her my paintings. But Melody is building a real future for herself. Family vacations were always planned around Melody's preferences. When she developed an interest in European history, we spent 3 summers touring historical sites in England, France, and Italy. My suggestion to visit Santa Fe because of its vibrant art scene was dismissed as impractical. "Maybe someday when you can pay for your own vacation," my father remarked. When I won first place in a statewide young artist competition in high school, my parents attended the ceremony, but left early because my father had an important call. The blue ribbon hung on my wall without comment, while Melody's academic trophies were pointed out to every visitor who came to our home. College decisions made the disparity even more apparent. Melody was accepted to Princeton with a merit scholarship, though our parents could easily afford the tuition. They bought her a brand new BMW as a congratulations gift and helped her furnish her apartment near campus with designer furniture. 2 years later, when I was accepted to the University of Connecticut to study art education, the response was lukewarm at best. "At least it's affordable," my father said, reviewing the tuition costs. I drove to campus in my 5-year-old Honda Civic that I had purchased with money saved from summer jobs. My apartment was furnished with secondhand items and IKEA furniture I assembled myself. Throughout college, I worked part-time jobs to cover my expenses, even though my classmates with similar family backgrounds received regular allowances. When I called home asking for help during a particularly tight month, my father suggested I budget better and reminded me that money management is an important life skill. Meanwhile, Melody graduated with honors and was accepted into a prestigious MBA program. My parents threw her a lavish graduation party at the country club, inviting over 100 guests to celebrate. My own college graduation was acknowledged with a dinner at a nice restaurant where the conversation eventually turned to Melody's new job offer. As adults, the pattern continued. Phone calls with my mother inevitably included updates about Melody's career advancement, her vacations, and her social connections. "Your sister just got another promotion," she would say. "Her boss says she's the most promising young executive they've hired in years." My updates about my teaching career or art exhibitions were met with polite but brief acknowledgement before the subject changed. Several times I tried to address the favoritism directly. "Mom, do you realize you always talk about Melody's accomplishments, but rarely ask about mine?" I asked during one phone call. "Don't be ridiculous, Courtney," she replied. We're equally proud of both our girls. You're just more sensitive and always comparing yourself to your sister." Despite the hurt, I maintained a relationship with my parents. I called weekly, visited for major holidays, and tried to accept that while they might not understand or fully appreciate me, they were still family. I developed strategies to protect myself emotionally during family gatherings, keeping conversations light and avoiding topics that highlighted the different treatment between my sister and me. I built a life I was proud of, finding fulfillment in teaching art to middle school students, selling my paintings at local galleries, and creating a circle of friends who valued me for exactly who I was. I told myself that my parents' approval was not necessary for my happiness, even as a part of me still yearned for it. I met James at a community art fair where I was exhibiting some of my watercolor landscapes. He wandered into my booth on a sunny Saturday afternoon, studying each painting with genuine interest. Unlike most visitors who would glance briefly before moving on, James spent time with each piece asking thoughtful questions about my techniques and inspiration. "These capture something beyond just the scenery," he said, standing before a painting of mist rising over a lake at dawn. "There's a feeling here, like a perfect moment of solitude." I was struck by his perception. That painting had been created after a solo camping trip following a particularly difficult family Christmas. It was indeed about finding peace in solitude. James introduced himself as a high school history teacher who had recently moved to the area. With his warm brown eyes and easy smile, conversation flowed naturally. By the end of the day, we had exchanged phone numbers, and he had purchased my lake painting for his new apartment. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant where we talked for hours about our shared passion for education, our favorite books, and our dreams for the future. James spoke about history with the same enthusiasm I felt for art, and he listened to me with an attentiveness I wasn't accustomed to in my family. James came from a modest background in Rhode Island, where his father worked as a plumber and his mother as a nurse. They had raised him and his two brothers in a cozy three-bedroom house filled with love and encouragement. The contrast between his family and mine became apparent the first time he invited me to Sunday dinner with them. His parents, Frank and Marie, welcomed me with warm hugs and genuine interest in my work. His brothers teased him good-naturedly and included me in family jokes. Around their dining table, laden with home-cooked Italian food, everyone spoke and everyone listened. No one's accomplishments were elevated above others, and each person's challenges were met with support rather than judgment. "Your family is amazing," I told James as we drove home that evening. "They can be a bit much sometimes," he laughed. "But yeah, they're pretty great." When it came time to introduce James to my parents, I prepared him as best I could. "They might seem a little formal," I warned, "and they'll probably talk a lot about my sister." The dinner at my parents' home was exactly as I'd feared. My mother asked polite but surface-level questions about James's career before launching into updates about Melody's recent promotion at her financial firm. My father spent most of the evening subtly interrogating James about his financial prospects. "Teaching is a noble profession," my father said in a tone that suggested it was anything but, though I imagine the compensation leaves something to be desired. James handled it all with grace, answering questions respectfully while maintaining his dignity. In the car afterward, he squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry they were a bit cold," he said. "But now I understand better why you are so wonderfully empathetic with your students. You know what it feels like not to be seen." Around this same time, my sister Melody married Warren, a successful stockbroker from a family similar to ours. My parents were ecstatic about the match, throwing an engagement party at their country club and speaking glowingly about Warren's career prospects and family connections. "Now that's a suitable match," I overheard my mother telling her friend at the engagement party. "They're already looking at properties in our neighborhood." Despite the contrast in our parents' attitudes, James and I grew closer. After 2 years together during a weekend trip to a small coastal town in Maine, he proposed on a rocky beach at sunset. The ring was modest but beautiful, a single small diamond flanked by tiny sapphires. "I know it's not the biggest stone," he said nervously as he placed it on my finger. "It's perfect," I assured him, meaning it completely. The ring, like James, was genuine and unpresuming in its beauty. When I called my parents to share the news, my mother's first question, after a brief congratulation, was about the ring. How many carats is it? You can always have it reset with something larger later. My father immediately asked about James's financial situation and whether we had discussed a prenuptial agreement. Given the family assets, it's something to consider, he said. James noticed my fallen expression after the call. They didn't take it well. They took it exactly as I expected, I admitted. But it doesn't matter. We get to build our own family now. We began planning a small, meaningful wedding that fit our budget and values. We found a lovely botanical garden that offered affordable weekend rates and researched caterers who could provide a simple but elegant meal for our 80 guests, mostly colleagues, friends, and James's family. I found a vintage-inspired dress at a boutique that specialized in sustainable fashion, and James's mother offered to arrange flowers from her garden and local flower market. We were excited about creating a day that reflected our relationship unpretentious, genuine, and filled with personal touches. Then came the unexpected phone call from my mother. "Your father and I have been talking," she said. "We'd like to pay for the wedding. It's tradition after all." I was stunned into silence. After years of feeling like a secondary consideration, this gesture seemed to signal a change, an acknowledgement, perhaps even an apology. Maybe I thought with a surge of hope they did love me as much as Melody after all. "That's very generous," I finally managed to say. "Are you sure?" "Of course," my mother replied. "Leave everything to me. We want the best for our youngest daughter." I hung up the phone with tears in my eyes, feeling a warmth I had been seeking from my parents for decades. James was cautiously optimistic when I told him the news. "That's a wonderful offer," he said. "Just make sure we still have the wedding we want, not the wedding they want." At the time, I didn't realize how prophetic his words would be. The transformation of our wedding plans began almost immediately after my parents' offer to pay. What had been a small, intimate celebration rapidly expanded into something I barely recognized. My mother called the day after her initial offer, already brimming with ideas. "I've been thinking about venues," she said. "The botanical garden is charming, but it's not really suitable. I've put a hold on the Westfield Country Club for the second Saturday in June." I felt a twinge of disappointment. "But we already made arrangements with the garden. Their wildflower meadow is perfect for the ceremony." "Darling, outdoor weddings are so unpredictable. What if it rains? The country club has gorgeous indoor spaces and exclusive catering. Trust me on this." Before I could formulate a response, she continued, "I've also started working on the guest list. There are so many people who would be hurt if they weren't included." Our original guest list of 80 quickly ballooned to over 250, as my mother added business associates, country club friends, distant relatives, and social connections I barely knew. When I expressed concern about the growing size, she dismissed it. "Your father has a position in the community to maintain. People expect certain standards." The dress shopping experience was another disappointment. I had envisioned a relaxed afternoon with a few close friends, perhaps a glass of champagne, as I found something that felt like me. Instead, my mother arranged an appointment at an exclusive bridal salon in New York City, inviting Melody, two of my mother's friends, and my future mother-in-law, who looked increasingly uncomfortable as the day progressed. "That bohemian style might work for a garden party," my mother said when I emerged from the dressing room in a flowing vintage-inspired gown I loved. "But it's not substantial enough for a proper wedding." The salon owner, sensing my mother's dominance and budget, brought out increasingly elaborate and expensive gowns. My mother and Melody exclaimed over a heavily beaded design with a cathedral-length train that cost more than my annual teaching salary. "This is exquisite," my mother declared. "It makes a statement." The statement it made wasn't mine, but after hours of trying on dresses and facing a united front of disapproval for my preferences, I relented. The dress was ordered with extensive alterations to fit perfectly. James noticed my subdued mood when I returned from the shopping trip. "How did it go?" he asked cautiously. "The dress is beautiful," I said, which wasn't a lie. "Just not what I originally had in mind." He wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "It's your day. You should feel comfortable and happy." "It's fine," I assured him, pushing down my disappointment. Maybe my mother is right about what works best for a formal wedding. As the planning continued, James expressed growing concern about the escalating extravagance. My parents had scheduled food tastings with the country club's executive chef, presenting multi-course meals with wine pairings for our approval. The floral arrangements being discussed featured imported blooms and elaborate structures. A 10-piece orchestra was contracted for the ceremony and cocktail hour, with a renowned band for the reception. "Courtney," James said one evening after a particularly overwhelming planning meeting, "this is getting out of hand. The wedding doesn't feel like us anymore." "I know it's more elaborate than we planned," I acknowledged, "but my parents offering to pay for everything feels like they're finally showing they value me. I've waited my whole life for them to do something like this for me, the way they've always done for Melody." James looked troubled, but nodded. "I understand. Just remember that their financial contribution doesn't give them the right to take over completely." But taking over was exactly what my mother did. She scheduled planning meetings when James couldn't attend due to teaching commitments. She made decisions without consulting us, presenting them as finalized arrangements that couldn't be changed without losing deposits. Every attempt I made to scale back or personalize an aspect of the wedding was met with guilt trips or dismissals. "After all, we're spending cutting corners now would be foolish," my mother would say. Or, "Everyone will be expecting something spectacular after Melody's wedding." My father remained mostly in the background during planning, occasionally making comments about doing things properly and reminding me how fortunate I was that they were handling everything. When I mentioned adding a special reading or music selection that had meaning to James and me, he would wave it away. "The professionals know best. Let them handle the details." Even the rehearsal dinner, which traditionally would have been hosted by James's parents, was taken over by mine. When Frank and Marie offered to host a casual dinner at their favorite Italian restaurant, my mother intervened. "We've already arranged a private room at Le Bernardin," she informed them. "No need to worry about a thing." I watched James's parents' faces fall as their contribution was dismissed. Later, they approached me privately. "We want to help somehow," Marie said. "Would it be all right if we made our family's traditional Italian wedding cookies for the dessert table?" The request was so modest and heartfelt that it brought tears to my eyes. "Of course," I said, hugging her tightly. "That would mean so much to us." As the wedding date approached, my anxiety grew. What had started as a hopeful sign of my parents' love had become a showcase of their wealth and social standing. The wedding that was taking shape barely reflected James and me as a couple. Still, I tried to focus on the positive, on the marriage that would begin after all the elaborate festivities ended. The night before the wedding, lying in the luxury hotel suite my parents had insisted on booking, I called James in his separate room. "Are you having second thoughts?" he asked, hearing the tension in my voice. "Not about marrying you," I assured him quickly. "Never about that. Just about this whole production tomorrow." "Just look for me at the end of the aisle," he said. "The rest is just one day. Our marriage is what matters, and that's ours alone." His words comforted me, and I fell asleep hoping that despite everything, our wedding day would still hold moments of genuine joy and meaning. The morning of our wedding arrived with a flurry of activity in my hotel suite. A team of hair and makeup artists appeared at 7, followed by a photographer my mother had hired to document every moment of preparation. My mother arrived shortly after, immediately beginning to direct everyone's efforts. "The curls need to be tighter," she instructed my hairstylist, "and the makeup should be more dramatic. The photographs need to pop." I caught my reflection in the mirror as the makeup artist added another layer of contour. I barely recognized myself beneath the elaborate hairstyle and full face of makeup, so different from my usual simple style. Melody arrived with a mimosa in hand, looking stunning in her maid of honor dress. She circled me with a critical eye as I stood in my undergarments waiting for help with the heavy wedding gown. "You actually look beautiful," she said, surprise evident in her tone. "The diet must have worked." I hadn't been on a diet, but I had lost weight from the stress of planning. Before I could respond, my mother whisked Melody away to fix a minor issue with her dress, leaving me alone for a precious moment. I took a deep breath and texted James, "Are you doing okay?" His response came quickly, "Never better. Can't wait to see you. Remember, just find me at the altar." Those simple words centered me amidst the chaos. This day, regardless of how it had been overtaken, was still about our commitment to each other. The drive to the church was silent. My father sat beside me in the vintage Rolls-Royce my mother had insisted on checking his watch repeatedly. "The ceremony starts in 20 minutes," he said. "Punctuality matters." The church, an imposing Gothic structure I had never attended growing up, loomed ahead. As we pulled up, I saw crowds of well-dressed guests filing in, many of whom I wouldn't be able to name. "Ready?" my father asked, offering his arm after the chauffeur opened my door. I nodded, unable to speak through the tightness in my throat. The massive wooden doors opened, and the orchestra began playing the processional music my mother had selected. As I stepped into the church on my father's arm, I was momentarily overwhelmed by the sea of faces turning to watch me. The aisle seemed impossibly long, decorated with elaborate floral arrangements on each pew. I searched the crowd for familiar faces, finding comfort when I spotted James's parents smiling encouragingly, his mother dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. And then I saw James standing tall at the altar, his eyes finding mine with such love that everything else momentarily faded away. His smile, nervous but genuine, reminded me why we were here. I focused on his face for the remainder of the long walk. "Who gives this woman to be married?" the minister asked when we reached the altar. "Her mother and I do," my father replied formally, before placing my hand in James's and taking his seat beside my mother in the front pew. James squeezed my hand gently. "You look beautiful," he whispered. "So do you," I whispered back, feeling my first real smile of the day. The ceremony proceeded according to the traditional script my mother had approved. There were no personal vows, no readings we had selected, nothing that particularly reflected our relationship, except the love evident in our eyes as we exchanged rings. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister finally announced. "You may kiss the bride." James's kiss was gentle and brief, appropriate for the formal setting, but his eyes promised more. As we turned to face the congregation as a married couple, the orchestra struck up the recessional, and we proceeded back down the aisle, now hand in hand. The reception at the country club was a blur of activity. The cocktail hour took place on a manicured terrace overlooking the golf course, with servers circulating with champagne and elaborate hors d'oeuvres. James and I were whisked away for photographs posed in various locations around the club's picturesque grounds. When we finally entered the ballroom for dinner, I was struck by the transformation. Crystal chandeliers glittered above tables adorned with towering floral arrangements. A massive ice sculpture of intertwined swans served as the centerpiece for the seafood display. A string quartet played softly as guests found their assigned seats. "Wow," James murmured beside me. "This is overwhelming." I finished for him. The evening proceeded according to the minute-by-minute schedule my mother had approved. Speeches were given by the best man and maid of honor. The traditional first dances were performed. The 5-tier cake was cut with appropriate ceremony. During our father-daughter dance, my father held me stiffly, maintaining a proper frame as we moved around the dance floor. "I hope you appreciate all this," he whispered, gesturing subtly to the opulent surroundings. No expense was spared. "Thank you," I replied automatically, though unease stirred within me at his tone. Later, as James and I circulated among the guests, I overheard my mother speaking to a group of her friends. "The flowers alone cost more than some people's entire weddings," she was saying. But of course we wanted everything to be perfect, especially after how spectacular Melody's wedding was. I pretended not to hear, moving on to greet more guests whose connections to us were tenuous at best. Many were business associates of my father, who took the opportunity to network even at his daughter's wedding. The few genuine moments came when we spent time with our actual friends. My college roommate hugged me tightly and whispered, "This is quite the production. Are you okay?" "I'm married to James now," I replied. "That's what matters." James's family, clearly uncomfortable amid the luxury, but determined to celebrate with us, brought warmth whenever we spoke with them. His mother pressed a small package into my hands during a quiet moment. "Just a little something from our family tradition," she said. "Nothing fancy." Inside was a delicate hand-embroidered handkerchief with our names and wedding date. "Your first heirloom as a family," she explained. "I made one for each of my sons' weddings." That simple, heartfelt gift meant more to me than all the expensive presents piled on the gift table. As the evening progressed, James and I managed to slip away briefly to a quiet corner of the terrace. "Are you happy?" he asked, his arms around my waist. "I'm your wife now," I said, resting my forehead against his. That makes me happier than anything, even though the wedding turned into something else entirely. It's just one day, I echoed his earlier words. Our marriage is what counts. We returned to the reception for the final traditions, throwing the bouquet and Garter cutting the cake again for guests who had missed the first ceremonial slice, and finally changing into our going-away outfits for the grand departure. Guests lined up with sparklers, creating a tunnel of light as we ran to the waiting limousine that would take us to the airport for our honeymoon flight. As the car pulled away, I looked back at the glittering scene, feeling a complex mix of emotions, relief chief among them. The performance was over. Now, our real life together could begin. Portugal was everything our wedding hadn't been: relaxed, authentic, and intimately ours. For 2 weeks, James and I explored coastal villages and historic cities, savoring local cuisine and wine without schedules or expectations. Our small hotel in Lisbon had a balcony overlooking terracotta rooftops that stretched to the sea, where we enjoyed breakfast each morning, planning our day at our own pace. This is what our wedding should have felt like, I said one evening as we watched the sunset from a clifftop restaurant in the Algarve. Just us experiencing something beautiful together. James reached across the table to take my hand. We have our whole lives for moments like this, and we can create a marriage that feels exactly like we want it to. Those 2 weeks allowed us to reconnect after the stress and disconnection of the wedding planning. We talked about our hopes for the future, our plans to save for a small house in our neighborhood, possibly starting a family in a few years, once we were more established. I want our children to grow up feeling unconditionally loved, I said one night as we walked along a moonlit beach. I want them to know their value doesn't depend on achievements or meeting someone else's expectations. They will, James assured me. We'll make sure of it. We discussed our finances openly, mapping out a budget that would allow us to pay off student loans while still saving for our goals. James had recently been considered for a department head position that would come with a modest salary increase, and I had started selling more of my artwork through a local gallery to supplement my teaching income. We won't be rich, James acknowledged, but we'll be comfortable, and more importantly, we'll be happy. It wasn't until our final days in Portugal that the outside world began to intrude. My phone, which I had been checking only occasionally, showed an increasing number of text messages from my mother. The early ones were typical, asking for updates about our trip and whether we were getting our money's worth at the luxury resort she'd recommended, but we hadn't chosen. The later messages took a different tone. References to settling accounts and finalizing arrangements appeared, along with questions about when we'd be meeting with them after our return. What do you think she means? I asked James, showing him the messages. He frowned. I'm not sure. Maybe something about thank you notes or gift records. I texted back a brief response saying we were enjoying our honeymoon and would be in touch after we returned, then put my phone away, determined not to let anything disrupt our final days of peace. We arrived home to our apartment filled with wedding gifts still in their packaging. The sight was overwhelming after the simplicity of our trip. We should start on thank you notes, I said, finding a notepad to begin recording who had given what. James brewed coffee, and we settled at our dining table, working methodically through the packages. We had opened about a dozen gifts when my laptop chimed with a new email notification. It's from my father, I said, clicking to open it. The subject line read, Wedding Expenses Invoice, which seemed odd, but I assumed it might be a record of payments for tax purposes. The email itself was brief. Courtney attached. Please find the complete invoice for wedding expenses. Payment is expected within 30 days. We can discuss payment options when you and James join us for dinner this weekend. Regards, Richard Williams. I opened the attachment with growing confusion. It was an itemized invoice listing every aspect of the wedding with associated costs. The venue rental, catering, flowers, photography, attire, transportation. Every detail was listed with premium prices attached. The total at the bottom of the page made my stomach lurch: $85,237.44. James, I said, my voice barely audible, you need to see this. He came around the table to look over my shoulder, his expression changing from curiosity to disbelief as he scanned the document. This has to be a mistake, he said. They offered to pay for the wedding. Why would they send an invoice? My hands were shaking as I picked up my phone to call my mother. She answered on the third ring, her voice cool and composed. Courtney, I take it you received your father's email. Mom, what is this? Why are we being billed for the wedding you and Dad offered to pay? You said it was tradition. We offered to arrange the wedding, she corrected. Obviously, we expected to be reimbursed for the expenses. Your father and I aren't made of money, Courtney. The room seemed to tilt around me. That was never stated or even implied. You literally said we'd like to pay for the wedding. I heard my mother sigh as though dealing with a difficult child. I'm putting your father on. He can explain the financial arrangements. My father's voice came on the line businesslike and firm. Courtney, this was always the arrangement. We fronted the cost to ensure quality vendors, but naturally the final responsibility falls to you and James. Dad, that's not true. You never once mentioned we would be paying you back. This was presented as a gift, the same as you did for Melody's wedding. Your sister's situation was entirely different, he replied dismissively. Warren comes from a good family with established wealth. They contribute significantly to our social circle. It was an investment in their future, which benefits the family as a whole. I felt as though I'd been slapped. And James and I don't deserve the same investment. James is a nice young man, my father said with the faint condescension that had always colored his assessment of my husband. But let's be realistic about his prospects. Our social connections aren't particularly valuable to a high school teacher. Tears burned in my eyes as the truth of my parents' conditional love was laid bare. All the hope I had nurtured that their offer signified genuine care crumbled to dust. We never would have agreed to such an extravagant wedding if we'd known we were paying for it, I managed to say. We had already planned something simple within our budget. Well, what's done is done, my father replied briskly. The bill reflects the choices made. We expect payment arrangements to be discussed promptly. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. James knelt beside my chair, his face a mix of anger and concern. What did they say? He asked, though I could tell from his expression that he had gathered the gist from my side of the conversation. Through tears, I relayed the conversation, including the callous comparison between him and my sister's husband. With each word, the magnitude of my parents' betrayal became clearer. We don't have this kind of money, I whispered finally. It would take years to pay off. James wrapped his arms around me, his voice tight with controlled anger. We're not paying it, Courtney. What they did was manipulative and deceitful. They deliberately misled you. But they'll expect it. They'll hold it over our heads forever. Let them try, James said, a firmness in his voice I rarely heard. We need to understand exactly what happened here. I think you should call your sister. My hands trembled as I dialed Melody's number. Despite our complicated relationship, she was the only one who might provide clarity about our parents' true intentions. Court, how was Portugal? She answered breezily. Melody, did Mom and Dad pay for your wedding? I asked without preamble. There was a pause. Of course they did. Why? And did they ever ask you to reimburse them afterward? What no? What's going on? I explained the invoice we'd received and the conversation with our parents. Melody's initial response was confusion, then uncomfortable silence. That doesn't make sense, she finally said. They covered everything for my wedding. Warren and I never paid a cent. Dad said it was different because Warren comes from money and has valuable social connections. Another uncomfortable silence followed. I don't know what to say, Court. That's awful. There's more to this, isn't there? I pressed, sensing her hesitation. What aren't you telling me? Melody sighed heavily. It's not just the wedding. They gave us $350,000 as a down payment for our house. It was a wedding gift presented at the rehearsal dinner. The revelation hit like a physical blow. While I was being handed an invoice for a wedding I hadn't even wanted in its final form, my sister had been gifted enough money to buy a house outright in many parts of the country. I didn't know they were treating you differently, Melody continued, sounding genuinely distressed. I assumed they were helping you both equally. They never mentioned any financial gift to us, I said, my voice hollow. Not even a small one. After ending the call with promises from Melody to speak with our parents, I relayed the additional information to James, who listened with growing indignation. This is beyond favoritism, he said. It's cruelty disguised as generosity. We need to talk to them face to face. We arranged to meet my parents at their home the following evening. The drive to their house was tense. My stomach knotted with anxiety and hurt. James reached over several times to squeeze my hand, a silent reminder that we were facing this together. My parents greeted us in their formal living room, drinks already poured, and a charcuterie board arranged on the coffee table, as though this were a normal social visit. My mother's smile was tight, my father's expression businesslike. "We should discuss payment options," my father began without preamble. "We understand the total amount is substantial, but we can arrange a payment plan with reasonable interest." "Interest," James repeated incredulously. "You expect to charge your daughter interest?" My mother frowned at his tone. "Richard is being extremely generous. Market rates would be much higher." I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. "Before we discuss anything, I need to understand why you told us you would pay for our wedding only to bill us afterward. And why Melody and Warren received a fully paid wedding plus a $350,000 house as a gift while we're being handed an invoice." My parents exchanged glances. My mother set down her wineglass with deliberate care. "The circumstances are entirely different," she said dismissively. "Melody married appropriately. Warren's family has connections that benefit all of us. Their children will attend the right schools, move in the right circles. And James doesn't meet your standards?" I asked, my voice breaking despite my effort to remain composed. My father leaned forward. "James is a teacher, Courtney. A noble profession, certainly, but not one that provides the lifestyle you were raised to expect. We had hoped you would choose someone with more ambition." James stiffened beside me, but remained remarkably controlled. "Mr. Williams, with all due respect, my career choice doesn't diminish my worth or my ability to provide a good life for Courtney. We may not be wealthy, but we'll be comfortable, and more importantly, happy." "Happiness doesn't pay country club memberships," my mother replied with a brittle laugh. "Courtney was raised with certain expectations. Expectations that apparently only apply if I marry someone you approve of," I said bitterly. My father's expression hardened. "We've always supported you, Courtney, despite your unconventional choices. Art school instead of business. Teaching instead of a real career. We accepted those disappointments. But we draw the line at subsidizing a marriage that won't maintain family standards." Disappointments. I repeated the words, striking deep. "That's how you see me, as a series of disappointments." "Don't be dramatic," my mother interjected. "We're simply being realistic about your choices." "Is that why you took over our wedding?" I asked, as understanding dawned. "It wasn't about supporting me at all. It was about maintaining appearances, making sure your friends and associates saw an appropriately lavish event, even if I was marrying just a teacher." My father waved a dismissive hand. "The wedding reflected our family's position. If you and James want to claim it as your own, you'll need to pay for it. Otherwise, we'll tell everyone exactly who footed the bill for your extravagance." "Extravagance we never asked for," James responded, finally showing anger. "We had a beautiful, modest wedding planned that reflected who we are as a couple. You pushed all of that aside to create a showcase for yourselves." My mother's face flushed with irritation. "We gave you a wedding most people could only dream of. A little gratitude wouldn't be amiss." Gratitude. I stood suddenly, unable to contain my emotions any longer. For what? For a lifetime of comparing me unfavorably to Melody. For dismissing my achievements and passions. For making me feel perpetually inadequate. Or for this final manipulation, presenting an elaborate gift with invisible strings attached. "This is exactly the emotional overreaction we've come to expect from you," my mother said coldly. "We never expected much from you anyway, which is why we're offering the payment plan. We know your limitations." Her words hung in the air, the cruelty of them so naked that even my father looked momentarily taken aback. In that instant, 3 decades of seeking approval and acceptance crumbled away, replaced by a clarity I had never experienced before. "We're not paying the invoice," I said quietly but firmly. "The wedding you created wasn't for us, it was for you. You can explain to your friends that you chose to showcase your wealth without our knowledge or consent." "This isn't a negotiation," my father began, but I cut him off. "You're right. It's not. Because there's nothing left to negotiate. You've shown me exactly where I stand and always have stood in this family. James and I will build our own life, our own family based on love that doesn't come with conditions or price tags." I turned to leave James, rising to follow me. My mother called after us, her voice sharp with warning. If you walk out that door, don't expect anything from us ever again. No help with a house, no inheritance, nothing. I paused at the threshold, looking back at the two people who had brought me into the world, but had never truly seen me. I stopped expecting anything real from you a long time ago. I just didn't want to admit it to myself. Goodbye, Mom, Dad. As we drove away from my parents' house, the weight of decades of emotional neglect seemed to lift slightly from my shoulders. James reached over to take my hand. I'm proud of you, he said simply, and I'm so sorry they couldn't see how extraordinary you are. Tears streamed down my face, a complex mix of grief and relief. What do we do now? Now, James said gently, we build the life we want surrounded by people who value us for exactly who we are. In the days that followed our confrontation with my parents, James and I worked methodically through a list of necessary actions. First, we packaged up the few expensive wedding gifts that had come directly from my parents and their close friends, returning them with brief, polite notes. For the gifts from extended family members who might have been coerced into excessive generosity, due to the wedding's scale, we included gentle explanations that we were simplifying our lives and preferred more modest items. I drafted a careful email to send to family members who might be drawn into the conflict, explaining our side of the situation without vitriol. James and I had planned a small, meaningful wedding within our means, I wrote. When my parents offered to pay, we understood it as a genuine gift, as is traditional. We were never informed that repayment would be expected, nor were we consulted about the escalating costs. We have now been presented with an invoice for $85,000 in amount we could never have agreed to as two educators. We wish to be transparent about the situation to prevent misunderstandings. The responses were mixed. Some relatives expressed shock and support, while others sided with my parents, suggesting we were ungrateful for the opportunity we had been given. My mother's sister Patricia, whom I had always been close to, called immediately after receiving my email. I knew something wasn't right about that wedding, she said. It didn't seem like you at all. Diana has always been obsessed with appearances, but this crosses a line. My father's brother was less sympathetic. Richard has worked hard for his success, he wrote. If he wants to protect his assets from your husband, that's his prerogative. James's family rallied around us completely. His parents were outraged on our behalf and insisted on having us for Sunday dinner, where they made it clear that family doesn't keep emotional scorecards. We don't have much in terms of money, Frank said during dinner, but we've put aside a little each month since James told us you two were serious. It's not much, maybe $5,000, but we'd like you to have it for a down payment when you're ready to buy a home. I was moved to tears by their generosity. We can't take your savings, I protested. Marie reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Family helps family. No strings, no expectations, no invoices. Just love. As the weeks passed, we established clear boundaries with my sister, who attempted to mediate the situation. Mom and Dad feel terrible about how things turned out, she claimed during one phone call. Maybe if you apologize for walking out. I won't apologize for standing up for myself and James, I replied firmly. If they feel terrible, they can acknowledge the manipulation and favoritism, and we can talk then. That conversation never materialized. Instead, my parents attempted different tactics, from having family members pressure us to threatening legal action for the wedding costs. Their attorney eventually advised them that without written agreement, they had no case, especially given the explicit verbal offer to pay for the wedding. 6 months after the wedding, we began seeing a therapist to process the complex emotions surrounding the situation. Dr. Nelson helped me recognize patterns of emotional neglect throughout my childhood and develop tools to heal from the ingrained belief that I was somehow less worthy than my sister. Your parents' behavior says everything about them and nothing about your value, she reminded me during one particularly difficult session. The hardest work you'll do is internalizing that truth. James attended many sessions with me, learning how to support my healing without trying to fix everything. Sometimes I get so angry on your behalf, he admitted. I want to protect you from ever feeling inadequate again. I'm learning to protect myself, I told him. And having you believe in me makes that possible. Creating boundaries with my sister proved challenging. Melody genuinely seemed to believe our parents' treatment of me had been fair and reasonable. They've always been generous in their own way, she insisted during one tense phone call. Maybe you just didn't appreciate it. Melody, they gave you a $350,000 house and handed me an $85,000 bill. I responded. That's not their own way of being generous. That's blatant favoritism. Eventually, we settled into a distant but civil relationship, connecting primarily on birthdays and major holidays, with carefully neutral conversations. The first holiday season without my parents loomed as a challenge, but James and I decided to create our own traditions rather than mourning what was lost. We hosted a Friendsgiving for colleagues and neighbors, decorated our apartment with handmade ornaments, and spent Christmas Day with James's family, where laughter and genuine affection filled every room. As we approached our first anniversary, an unexpected letter arrived from my mother's eldest sister, Aunt Catherine, a wealthy widow who had always lived somewhat separately from the family due to her independent spirit and frequent international travel. I was at your wedding, she wrote, and while it was certainly lavish, it didn't seem to reflect the thoughtful young woman I've watched you grow into. When I heard through Patricia about the invoice and the disparity in treatment between you and your sister, I was appalled, but not entirely surprised. Your mother has always prioritized appearances over authenticity, a trait I fear came from our own upbringing. While I can't undo the hurt you've experienced, I would like to offer some assistance as you build your life with James. Enclosed was a check for $40,000. Consider it an extremely belated wedding gift, the note concluded. No strings attached, no expectations, no repayment required. Use it for a home for travel for whatever brings you joy. You deserve happiness on your own terms. The unexpected generosity brought fresh tears, but these were healing rather than bitter. With Aunt Catherine's gift and the savings from James's parents, combined with our own careful budgeting, we had enough for a modest down payment on a small craftsman-style house in our favorite neighborhood. The day we received the keys to our new home exactly 1 year after the wedding invoice arrived felt like a symbolic turning point. As we walked through empty rooms filled with possibility rather than judgment, James pulled me close. I was thinking, he said hesitantly. Would you want to use one of the bedrooms as a nursery? Not immediately, but maybe starting to try in the next year. The idea of creating our own family built on unconditional love and acceptance filled me with both joy and trepidation. Do you think we're ready? That I'm ready. What if I don't know how to be a good parent? James smiled gently. You know exactly what not to do, which is a pretty good start. And you're the most loving person I know. Any child would be lucky to have you as their mother. We shared the news of our house purchase with James's family, who immediately offered to help with painting and repairs. We also sent a note to Aunt Catherine, who responded with warmth and an invitation to visit her in Santa Fe, where she had settled after years of traveling. I debated whether to share our news with my parents, but ultimately decided against it. The complete silence from them since our confrontation spoke volumes about their unwillingness to reconsider their treatment of us. While I had not closed the door permanently on reconciliation, I had come to understand that protecting my hard-won sense of self-worth required maintaining distance from those who undermined it. When I discovered I was pregnant 3 months after moving into our home, we shared the joyful news with James's family and my supportive aunt, but not with my parents or Melody. The decision wasn't made from spite, but from self-preservation, a recognition that this new life deserved to be celebrated without the shadow of conditional approval. Your grandparents will love you completely without measurement or comparison. I promised my growing belly as I painted clouds on the nursery walls. And so will your mom and dad. As I approached the 3rd trimester, a letter arrived from my mother. I recognized her handwriting on the envelope and felt a momentary surge of hope that perhaps time had brought reflection and change. The contents quickly dispelled that notion. We've heard through family that you're expecting, she wrote. While we're pleased that you're continuing the family line, we remain deeply disappointed by your ingratitude regarding the wedding. Your father and I provided you with every advantage which you consistently failed to appreciate. Should you wish to reconcile, we would expect acknowledgement of your behavior and a payment plan for the outstanding wedding costs. I read the letter twice, searching for any hint of genuine caring or grandmotherly excitement, finding none. With a steadiness that would have been impossible a year earlier, I placed the letter in a file rather than responding. The lack of pain surprised me, a testament to the healing work I had done. They still don't get it, I told James that evening, and they probably never will. He wrapped his arms around me, hands resting gently on my expanded belly. Their loss entirely. This little one will have more than enough love. 3 years after receiving that wedding invoice, our life bears little resemblance to what I once thought family meant. Our son Thomas, now 2, fills our modest home with laughter and creativity. My part-time teaching schedule allows me to maintain my art practice, and I've started offering community classes in the small studio we built in the backyard. James was promoted to department head last year, bringing both professional satisfaction and a welcome increase in our financial stability. We hear occasional news about my parents through extended family channels. They continue to socialize in their exclusive circles, travel extensively, and spend lavishly on Melody's children. My father suffered a minor heart attack last year, and I sent a brief note wishing him recovery, which went unacknowledged. My sister has made sporadic attempts to reestablish a closer relationship, always with the caveat that I should reconcile with our parents. "They're getting older, Courtney," she said during our last phone conversation. "Do you really want to look back with regret?" "I've made peace with my decisions," I told her. "My door remains open if they ever want to acknowledge the hurt they caused and build a healthier relationship. But I won't subject myself or my family to conditional love and manipulation again." We've built a rich community around us, a chosen family of friends, colleagues, neighbors, and James's wonderful relatives. Thomas knows his grandparents as Nana Marie and Papa Frank, who visit often and shower him with affection rather than expectations. He has great aunts and uncles who send birthday cards with $5 bills and call just to hear his latest toddler adventures. What he doesn't have are grandparents who measure his worth against a predetermined standard, or love that comes with financial calculations attached. The invoice that once felt like a devastating rejection has become surprisingly one of the most clarifying moments of my life. It stripped away pretense and forced me to see the reality of my family dynamics without the filter of wishful thinking. While the pain was acute, the freedom that followed has been transformative. I've learned that family isn't defined by blood, but by consistent care and unconditional acceptance. I've discovered my own worth independent of external validation. And perhaps most importantly, I've broken a cycle of conditional love that could have continued into the next generation. To those of you watching who may see yourselves in my story, please know that you are inherently valuable, regardless of how others have treated you. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for health and happiness. And it's never too late to create the family you deserve, whether through birth, marriage, friendship, or community. Have you ever had to create boundaries with family members who couldn't see your worth? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else find the courage to value themselves. And if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real stories about finding strength through difficult experiences. Thank you for listening, and remember, you deserve to be loved without conditions or calculations.